This is the infamous did I say infamous? This is the infamous announcement trailer that seemed to doom Highguard the second it dropped. This was the Game Awards final reveal and was instantly hit with tons of backlash. I think if this trailer had just been one of the other trailers announced at the Game Awards, you might not have seen quite the level of negativity, but when it was held back as this is the big announcement from the creators of Titanfall and Apex, except not the actual studio, just some of the developers, and oh look, it's another hero shooter. You instantly had the this is just Concord 2, etc. And then the game developers were completely silent. There has been zero marketing since then. It's been a weird story where they're almost getting some viral marketing just out of the weird Game Awards final reveal followed by complete radio silence. Now, the silence has been promised to be broken on launch day, which is tomorrow as of the time of me filming this video, and the game is free to play. So January 26th, you can download the game and check out how it runs on your own system if you're interested. I'm curious what the level of interest is. Is it going to get interest because of the negative backlash? Is it kind of a reverse viral marketing? There is no bad news, bad publicity is good publicity. I mean, how did that work out for Concord? Anyway. Also, apparently there's been interesting stories running about apparently getting that final Game Awards big reveal event wasn't even something the developers were specifically seeking. It was kind of offered to them at, now they're saying at no cost, but I'm wondering if it's just no additional cost compared to probably, I would imagine they were already at least going to run an ad of some type, just that trailer, maybe not as the big final reveal event, but the Game Awards showrunner. There's discussions over whether there was going to be a Half-Life 3 reveal that then Valve backed out of or something. Again, that's a lot of the leaks and rumor side of things, but it's been interesting to follow the story. But the point is, we'll find out about the game right before it launches or as it launches, and there's been complete radio silence. But we did get the PC system requirements up, so we at least have something to go off of. But before I delve into those, we also have it revealed that the game will require boot protection, secure boot, and TPM 2.0. Now, this is becoming more and more common for big multiplayer releases. This was the case for Battlefield 6. It was the case of Call of Duty Black Ops 7 and others. And there has been a lot of reports that it has been, well, not completely effective. It's at least had some level of success, maybe above less restrictive levels of anti-cheat, but at the same time, it has caused issues for a lot of people on a lot of systems. And then there's some questions about whether you want to provide a game or game developer kernel level access to your system, which is a completely reasonable take to have. Also, it's using Easy Anti-Cheat, which requires manual removal after the game install, and while, to my knowledge, Easy Anti-Cheat does have some Linux compatibility if the developers want it to, that many of the games that use it don't choose to go that route. So this could, call into question things like Steam Deck support or, other issues like that. Now, even with all of that in mind, we can still talk about these system requirements. That being said, these are the older style of system requirements. It's not telling us a resolution or frame rate target or graphics settings. So this is going to be of limited usefulness, but since we're here, let's go ahead and talk about it. Also, on the right-hand side of the screen, I have the Tech Power Up relative performance chart. Why have I done that? Well, partially because you might not have encyclopedic knowledge of every old graphics card and how it relates to your current graphics card. So let's say you don't have a GTX 1066 gigabyte or RX 588 gigabyte, then you need to know how does that relate to this GPU in your system. So I'll link the Tech Power Up relative performance chart in the video description. And the reason I like this for this use case is because while it's not the same thing as a full graphics card review, and it's certainly not the same thing as benchmarking these graphics cards in this particular game, it does have pretty much every graphics card out there, and you can click on one, set it to a 100% performance baseline, and then scroll up or down from there, find yours, and look at how they perform. So in other words, if you have a GTX 1070, you could notice that yours is about 35% faster than the minimum requirement for this game. That's how to use this chart, so it's pretty handy. It also lets us find out whether these pairings make any sense, because in my PC system requirements yesterday, looking at Marathon, another game that's maybe getting accused of being the next, Concord 2. But anyway, we'll find out when that releases. They were pairing up GPUs that made absolutely no sense from saying they have a similar performance standpoint. Now, I will say that Highguard does seem to be pairing up GPUs that actually make sense relative to each other, although they're not giving any Intel GPU listed, so that's a bit of a negative there. But NVIDIA GPUs are pretty small market share, so I can't necessarily blame them at this point in time. The GTX 1060 6GB, do notice, is being called out as the 6GB version. There was also a 3GB version of the card, so be careful which one you have. And the RX 580 8GB version, I believe there might have been a 4GB version of the card. I could be wrong on that one, so do be clear. They're saying you want at least 6GB to run the game, seems to be how I'm reading that. And those cards are roughly in the same performance class, not necessarily exactly the same, and in certain games, they might even be 10, 15, 20% apart. But on average, they're relatively similar, which is what we're seeing here backed up in the performance chart. Now, what if you don't have these two GPUs? Well, if you have a 5500 XT, a 6500 XT, a 1650 Super, a GTX 980, cards like those, you are in a very similar performance class, but do check your VRAM is at least 6GB. That's the way I'm reading this. Now, there also, if you have a card like a 1660, a RTX 3050, now you're, a bit more powerful, 20% maybe. 1660 Ti, 1660 Super, 1070, you're talking, 30% or so more powerful. 5600 XT, 1070 Ti, 1080, we're now talking around 50% more powerful. 5700, 2060, kind of similar ballpark. 2060 Super is now 67% faster. RX 6600, 72% faster. 2070, you're talking 80%. 5700 XT, we're over 80% faster. Arc A750. 6600 XT, we're talking about double the performance. 3060 12GB, around double the performance. Arc A770, 1080 Ti, 2070 Super, we're now hitting the recommended GPUs, which is a 2080 at 220% the performance of the 1066GB. So, in other words, while we can't see what the exact resolution graphic settings targets are here, what we can see is they're asking for a little over double the performance from the minimum to jump up to the recommended. Now, there's a couple ways you could read that. You could read it as the minimum are targeting lowest settings 30 FPS at like a low resolution, maybe 1080p or 720p, and then maybe the recommended GPUs are targeting those same settings and resolutions, but at 60 FPS, maybe with a little bit of a settings bump, and that's why it's a little over double the performance. But hopefully, the minimums are targeting 60 FPS at the lowest possible settings, since we're talking about a PvP raid shooter, so there's at least some PvP elements to this. And then the maybe the recommended are then also hitting 60 FPS but higher resolutions and graphics settings, or maybe same resolution and settings but much higher frame rate. So that's how I would hope to interpret this, but again, we'll have to actually go with the actual game and benchmark it. So let me know, and partially I'm going to use the view count in this video as well as the comments to judge, should I waste any time benchmarking this? It's going to be free to play, so you can try it out for yourself, but maybe there's a lot of interest partially from the negative press coverage, so people want to see how it goes for themselves. We'll see. Now, if you have the RTX 2080, again, you're on the recommended GPU. Now, how do we scale from there? From there, you can see that a newer card like an RTX 5050 is very similar performance, an Arc B580, an RTX 4060, an RX 7600 XT. You're in a very similar performance class. A 3060 Ti is a bit more powerful. An RTX 5060 or 4060 Ti 8GB, you're talking like 30% above the recommended specs now. If you're on cards like a RX 7600, 2070 Super, 1080 Ti, Arc A770, RTX 3060, you're a bit below the recommended, but you're still in a similar ballpark. Now, the other system specs, one thing that's nice to see in the current RAM price situation is that they only require 8GB of system RAM minimum, and even only recommend 12GB, so at least you're not spending a lot of money on system RAM. They also don't need a ton of storage space at 25GB, although they do spec an SSD for the minimum and an NVMe SSD as the recommended. Generally, games that state that you can still run on an HDD, but you can sometimes have some problems with not just longer load times, but certain certain assets loading in late, which can lead to stuttery gameplay or kind of visuals looking wrong as something kind of loads in incorrectly or isn't there on time. Now, the CPUs for the minimum are an i5-6600K or Ryzen 5 1600, so some pretty old processors there, and the recommended i5-9600K, which was only 6-core 6-thread, and a Ryzen 5 3600, which generally gets similar performance to the CPUs in like PlayStation 5, so current-gen console-style CPUs here. And they're saying Windows 10 is minimum, Windows 11 recommended, and remember, some Windows 10 systems might not actually have motherboards that support Secure Boot and TPM 2.0. So anyway, that's what I've got for you guys. Let me know, are you interested in me benchmarking this? Apparently it unlocks in about 22 hours. But again, the developers will be apparently giving us more information about, for example, what actually is a PvP raid shooter. Based off of what I can see in the gameplay that they're showing, to me it looks like there's going to be some PvE elements because there's these like insta-kills on these weak-looking enemies, but then there's also some like enemy heroes that look like they're going to be kind of a bigger deal to fight against. That's how I'm kind of interpreting this, where there's these easy instant kills in the trailer. So they're saying it's like a raid. So I'm wondering if the attacking team fights against some NPC weaklings on their way to charge up their abilities to then use against the, defending actual heroes. I don't know. I'm just kind of speculating. We'll find out. That's probably enough of me talking about Highguard for now. Like I said, I'll look at your comments and the view count on this video to find out if it's worth using any of my time tomorrow benchmarking the game. Hope you guys found the video useful and or interesting, and you all have an excellent day.